Итак, мы начинаем
We start
дня работы нашего форума.
the last session of today's forum. We do start, yes.
В качестве вступления
By way of introduction, I will tell you a small story. A few years ago, I witnessed a very interesting event in Kiev, right on the sidewalk, under Viktor Pinchuk's building. Damien Hirst was squatting, and he drew with a chalk around a mannequin. That was during that campaign around the bird flu. People were walking around, they looked at David Hirst and were passing by. Why? Because I stopped people and said, "Look, that's Damien Hirst." There was no response. I wondered what they needed to start taking pictures of him. The matter is that if they knew that the person squatting there was a person whose work of art is worth tens of millions of dollars, and whose work was bought by the biggest Ukrainian collectioner, Viktor Pinchuk, certainly they would form a ring around him, which actually happened when I attracted them to his person. Well, that's an interesting story. Denis, why did you tell us all that? And that is because we will be discussing the relationship between the art market and artistic criticism, how the market influences the criticism and whether the criticism can influence the market. We are about to start. So, I invite to the podium Dmitry Khankin, the co-owner of the Triumph Gallery, Anna Arutunova, historian, art critic, Vedomosti Petnitsa newspaper, Leonid Shishkin, the owner of Leonid Shishkin's gallery, Irina Osipova, art critic, specialist in the antiquities market, Business FM radio station, René Guérin, collectioner and expert in Slavic languages, Andrei Konchalovsky, producer in cinema and theater, and the main speaker will be Judith Benamo, art critic and the author of a great book, The Price of Art. Judith, je vous en prie. Готовьтесь, возьмите наушники, я буду говорить по-французски.
Okay. Denis? Okay.
Yes, you may start, please.
To touch upon this topic, rather elitist topic, the art critics and the art market, let us start with one constatation, very simple. What do your kids do when they are not at school? Most of them. Do they read books or they sit in front of the computer and click the buttons to communicate with their clan and learn news about a star or their champion. Naturally, being cultured parents with traditional culture, we want them to read, but that is not so. In the early 21st century, the world is full of images that are passed with light speed. The time to read, which is necessary to understand something deeply, now mainly is used for university classes. The university area is limited, and this learning, which is elitist learning, does not always result in employment. That happens to kids, that happens to adults. The hard copies are never read. The press is funded not through the willingness of the readers to read, but through the ads that is placed in those publications. Fewer novels are read, fewer essays on literature. Because of that, criticism is dying or feels bad. It became the victim of its own narcissism. For a long time, at least in France, the use of that discipline seemed very hermetic, self-locked, self-contained, to show the high level of education of the author. This crisis related to lack of understanding of texts on art is continued in some galleries and is reflected in some press communiques. The old discourse of art has become illegible, but on the contrary, what appears in the reviews is anything. It's important that the gallery or the exhibition is discussed. Everything depends on the format of the site, of the website. The art must continue to exist in the face of the massive information flow. This is cynical, but this corresponds to the reality. At the same time, since the late 80s, there appeared a phenomenon which really strikes. That's the influence of auctions such as Sotheby's and Christie's. For instance, many models that are shown on their catalogs are intended for people who know what they talk about. Quite often, on bad paper, badly represented, they inform the people who really know what they are. The people who are really deeply involved with modern art and sculpture are few, but they must attract the new public who would like to get access to lunches, to events, even if they come from old aristocratic families. And at that moment, the process becomes truly democratic. The auctions invite startups, the newly rich, and who want to get recognition. The auctions start to address this new public and must find a way to render the information to them. So the Christie's catalogs become something in between the network stores catalogs and the art magazines. Luxurious paper, lots of gloss, good pictures, and all that makes the artist prestigious, and they try to represent the best artists who have a real sense to the collectioners who have a feeling for art. At the same time, the price rules the world. You don't buy Picasso because it's Picasso, you buy it because it's worth $100 million. So the value of the picture is substituted by the value of the commodity, and your daughter who clicks the buttons of the computer to correspond with her classmates enters that circle of people who get the specialized databases and the internet, who provide the prices and the achievements of each of the artists. In the early 90s, modern art brought more money. But in the end of the 90s, prestigious sales were rather a loss of money. Then contemporary art did not earn a lot. Luxurious catalogs were published. Glamorous events were organized, and that's what happened with Damien Hirst and Kunz, and that was what happened with Public in France and in New York, and that happened in the Sotheby's. And Philippe Sigalo, the head of modern art in Christie's, today is one of the greatest purchaser and seller of art. This enchantment with modern art is a real phenomenon in the society. There is financial elite who wants to consume modern art. They visit sales in New York, London, Hong Kong, and Venetian Biennale, where nothing is sold by definition. I will provide a recent example. The last sale in New York, the latest sale in New York on the 8th and the 9th of November this year is a good example of that. Quite recently, I interviewed Tobias Mayer, who is in this picture. And I made this picture after he successfully sold his art a week previously. He's a very talented manipulator who has a great taste of modern art, and like his mates, his culture in art exceeds the boundaries of the 20th century, and he's done a lot for the market, but he doesn't believe that this reduces his influence over the tastes of the contemporary buyer. He knows how to do a catalog, how to make a catalog. He is concentrated on one room this year, and because the market is very volatile right now, this market is especially favorable for Gerhard Richt. It's good to sell it, and the prices on his pieces are established by Tate Modern and other cultural institutes. Then he moved to National Gallery in Berlin. He was shown in Modern Art Center, Pompidou Center in Paris. Tobias Mayer invited to participate him in his catalog the main authorities on modern painting. I will show you the text. This is a conversation by Hans Ulrich Olbricht. That's the London platform, the most fashionable institution in the British capital. Rosenthal and Normal Store, the commissioner of Venetian Biennale. The catalogue has 45 pages dedicated to the creation of this artist. This is much more than is usually published, and we are in a good company of very enlightened people. Tobias Mayer's purpose was to prove that his art is just as important as Rothko's. He says that in 20 years, those pictures will be considered equal to Rothko. He is trying to convince us that abstract painting is much more important in his life than figurative painting, and therefore he places a picture of an German painter of the 80s, close to his picture. And the next picture is a painting by Rothko. Tobias Mayer, does he protect the position of an art historian? To juxtapose Richter and Rothko is just like comparing two stock exchange quotations. And Gerhard Richter, it is written, is probably one of the most important painters of this generation. Few artists are as influential, and there are few of them who fought so dedicatedly. And when a person has a lot of money, and when someone with a lot of money wants to buy a painting, it's silly not to buy Richter. That's what follows from this catalog. There is a Sotheby's catalog, which is all fully dedicated to Richter. He made a system of abstract hanging of the paintings. And as you see, he hung those paintings like you could hang a Rothko, like in a chapel. He says that my work is not rhetoric. I believe in beauty, and all that radical strategy bore its fruit. As a result, he achieved record prices. I want to show all the work by Richter in that catalog. They were sold at $74 million. That is 28 million more than forecasted. And an abstract painting 3 meters long, the first one in the catalog, that is the painting that would decorate any collectioner's dining room, sold at the highest price. Of course, it's a decoration. It's not the usual consumption of art. And I asked the curator whether people distinguish between decorations and art. But he said that a great painting, a great picture, well, this painting was not sold. Why? Was it too intellectual? The start price was $7 million. In reality, this painting was inspired by a picture from the Stern that was a lady from modern German society. The painting was painted in 1965. He named it after his neighbor, Frau Nippenberg, and he's not only a abstract painter who goes beyond the limits of decoration. In his time, he painted very interesting art. He painted his uncle. It was called Uncle Rudy, and that was a Nazi functionary in a suit, and that was a direct link to the recent German history. And so the task was to show that his neighbor or his uncle lived during that time and was an actor in the dramatic history of Germany. This painting was not sold at the Christie's. Amongst a great number of paintings offered, and another painting sold at a record price. This is again a photograph. It's a big decorative format by Andrea Górski. This is a photographic print of the Rhine, a minimalist colors, green and blue, and that picture exists in 6 copies. It was sold at $4.3 million. And again, there was a retrospective by the same painter in 2002 in a very respectable institution at Pompidou Center at MoMA. The money gives a reliability to the artist, but to achieve the highest respect, you need to find a person who has his own ideas, and in particular a curator. I will finish with a book that I'm reading now. It is a book of conversations between Maurice Catoulan with a curator of a museum in France who says a few quite obvious things. We talk about the retrospective that is currently going in Guggenheim Museum in New York. He wrote, "I worked like a madman between 1990 and 2000, and then the investors came and started speculating using my art. I was surprised. I said, in the long run, the art market turned out to be more receptive than those who analyze art." He never mentions the critics. There are some critics that I respect, but I prefer to look at the paintings or their reproduction than read what is written about that. Reading about art is something that is very different from contemplating art or talking about art. And so I thought that the only form of existence for a critic is to undergo a radical renovation. If the art is renovating, if the art market exists in a new form, you must rethink a critic. Thank you. Andrei, your turn. Well, the more I listen to the very clever and educated people who are discussing the problems for 2 days, the more pessimistic my mood becomes, I can confess. My pessimism is related to the fact that we practically don't see any way out of the situation. Everyone sees the crisis. To different extents, we talk about a crisis. We talk about a crisis in criticism, in public, in policy. But can we overcome what I heard now? Can we defeat the market? Unfortunately, it's utopian. You cannot defeat the market simply because, as Francois Mauriac said, the future century will be the age of football. He was wrong. He thought it would be the 20th century. He was wrong by a century, but today we have the age of football, and David Beckham is much more popular than any cinema star or a writer. You cannot fight the market, also because there's a lot of very clever, far-sighted people who want to earn money. And those people who want to earn money will find and must find new and new ways of selling something. Well, a gadget has been invented. The photograph. How is it done? Dali said, "I'm rich because the world is full of morons." You can manipulate people who don't have a high culture and their own opinion, but have money. And you can form certain ideas in their minds, the ideas that guarantee that their investment will not be lost and even multiplied. There's a world of those people, the people who, so to say, know where to invest. And because of that, certainly our lamentations is like a sect in which it's like flagellation, because we flagellate the modern civilization, and I can't see a way out. Maxim Cantor has a political approach, a class approach to processes. Some people may have different approaches, but I have a feeling when I talk to you that there's at least two categories of participants in this room. One category is the people who have dedicated their lives to the study of art or are related to art in some fashion. Part of the people who are interested in art but are not yet professionals. And because of that, I wanted to think about, you see, a market is a terrible word. The money is a terrible word because the market has its own laws. But not so many people, there aren't so many people who try to explain or popularize those principles to figure out what happened with art throughout that period. Since the High Renaissance, and when the function of an artist was absolutely different from what it is now. In my book, The Gloss, in my movie, one of the characters says, "What you can't sell is not art." That's an idiotic phrase. But unfortunately, in my opinion, it becomes more and more relevant for the arts market. Trade, selling, art ranks third after drugs and weapons. The world is full of morons, that is true. And from that point of view, I want to attract your attention to the fact that the critics, in my opinion, do not perform one of their essential functions. There's a closed cycle. Artist, critic, market, artist. The demand defines the supply, but who defines the demand? The critic. And there, something that the previous speaker was speaking about happens. The numbers play a greater role than the essence. When I say about the essence, I'm speaking about the essence of this or that piece of art. I want someone to answer me. I want you to think together with me about where that bifurcation fork took place when an artist started expressing his feelings towards the world. Up to a certain moment, the subject for the painter, for the artist, was the nature. But a time came, and Ambroise Valère, at the European Art capital understood that the discovery of a new artist was the essence of business. He was a great salesman, he was a great dealer, but he was also a connoisseur. And he honestly believed that what he was selling was high art. He did not believe that he would sell something because the world is full of idiots. He said, I believe this is great art. But somewhere at that point of time, when the idea of the arts market appeared, the artist, first slowly and then very fast, decided that his purpose was not to depict nature, but to sell to a buyer. And Benedict Lifshitz wrote about that when he wrote about futurists. And his book is called One and a Half Eyed Marksman. He was writing about a painter who thought about how to turn his picture and then opened a dictionary of foreign words and invented a name for the picture. The longer the better. And that was interesting that David Hirst is using the same trick. He rationalized his rather mindless actions. We never think about it. And I believe that the art critic should, in my opinion, perform a different function. On the one hand, he should just promote. Unfortunately, the real deep promotion that is explaining to the spectator what is good and what is bad, not what can be sold and what can be bought, but what is art. What art is. And you can tell it anyway. Well, the Dick on the Bridge was a serious political act, but it has nothing to do with art. Because they were not aiming at the spectator, they were aiming at FSB, the Federal Security Service. And I think what the modern art criticism is lacking is the desire to communicate to people who would later become part of the market. The people who visit museums, the people. I'm convinced that the modern spectator, the mass spectator, I visited the gallery several times, modern galleries, and I wanted to stick a label under the picture. The value is so and so, no artistic value. And I thought that they would arrest me and that would actually turn things on. But then I saw puzzled faces of spectators. They don't see whether they can invest into that painting. Yeah, some people thought about investing in those paintings and making a good profit on that. People are interested in preserving their capitals. And I think that the essence of such activity is practically needed, but it's absent. And don't forget that I was thinking that 50 years ago, the golden bull, the Moloch, the market, paid attention to the older generation, cinema, literature of any kind of entertainment, restaurant, anything. All that was intended for the fathers and the grandfathers. The older generation was at the focus of the commercial attention. After, or roughly, in the 80s, when the teenager generation appeared, after the Star Wars, the market put teenagers into the focus of its attention. Food, entertainment, fashion, music, rap, football, sports, Nike, Puma, sports clothes, and all that. The market turned attention to teenagers, and the teenagers, in principle, do not need art. They're quite happy with comic books. And the elitist art has become unachievably elitist, while any major piece of great art is available to a person from the street who does not understand why there should be a combination of red and green. In this game, the perceptive function has left the Western art as different from Indian or Chinese art and even Latin American art. So this chasing the new names that you can buy cheaply and sell at a high price. The need for it's just like short skirts today, mini skirts tomorrow, high heels today, short heels tomorrow, because you have to sell it and buy new things. It's the law of the market. And this vulgar law of today's market defines the discoveries in fine arts today, cynically, in a calculated way, and you can always find suckers.
You might have heard when Diamond Hirst made his sales, he decided to do it without Sotheby's and without Christie's. However frustrated the both auction houses were, he made it himself.
Non,
Oui, oui, ah bah, ça c'est mon métier. Hein.
non,
Sotheby's.
excusez-moi. Mais
Oui, vraiment.
les choses avec Pinchuk, Pinchuk était
Non,
là.
avec Pinchuk, il a fait une exposition.
L'exposition
No, with Pinchuk he organized an exhibition, but he made it with Sotheby's.
achetait sont payés.
Yes, but he sold it through his agent without paying a commission. Yes, but the sales was organized with a mediation or with the participation of Sotheby's, but without the commission. Sotheby's. I know it from Pinchuk himself,
12
because 10 or 12 rich millionaires from Ukraine who didn't even know anything about the art, he told them, buy it, and they bought. Just because they were friends. And it was a phenomenal deal where one smart dealer, one smart marchand, one smart businessman united with other such people and bought something that makes Daniel Hirst. And I'm sure that Daniel Hirst today can sell a normal, realistic cat or a flower in much more expensive than it would cost of the other artist. I want to finish, but I will listen to what you'll say. Rich people were always arrogant. And I'm preparing now a book about an artist of the 19th century, about a very good artist of the 19th century. And this artist built a big pavilion during an exhibition in France in order to bring together all visitors of this world exhibition. And he paid for the entrance fee. It was a realistic pavilion. And inside this realistic pavilion were only his paintings, and they were sold just to make a deal. And it was financed by Montpellier. When you look at all those systems that, or schemes that Rubens used to sell his paintings, Of course, he's the best artist, but at all times, painters wanted to earn money. It doesn't necessarily mean that they are bad artists. No, I have doubts as regards the authenticity of, or the truth behind Daniel Hirst's work. I think that the lust for money has overwhelmed him today, but the arts and the want for money can go in parallel. Take Dürer, for example. He hired an agent who was commissioned to sell his lithographies all around Europe and etchings. And this agent would go around Europe, and he would travel even before Dürer around Europe and disseminate his etchings. All those money schemes were not invented now, they're invented much earlier. But you understand that the art and the money are two different things. You haven't understood me correctly then. I was just telling that every artist wants to eat. Every artist wants to get paid for his work. But it's one thing when an artist expresses his opinion about an art and then tries to sell it. And it's a completely different thing when the person and the artist knows beforehand what he or she has to do in order to sell something. These are two different functions, and that's where bifurcation comes in place. And I prefer this instead of Hirst. Though, of course, Leonardo da Vinci was referring to his dad for money, as well as many others. No one tells you that artists want to work free of charge, but I'm not telling you this. I'm telling you that at those times, they were not market in this current sense. At that time, Leonardo's father was buying his paintings to live forever, not to invest the money. One thing is when you buy a painting for it to decorate your house, it's one thing. The other thing is when you buy a painting which you do not understand and you want to resell it after some time, it's an investment. That's why you speak about prices, because prices became more important than the sense itself, than the essence. It doesn't really matter whether it's Picasso or not. It matters mostly whether it's 100,000 USD or less. The market value. The market value notion of market value has changed, has replaced the artistic value. And this is the drama. The market, as Hollywood did, destroyed the real art. The market destroyed this direct impression from an artist, even though this impression is naive. But today, the artist has 3 or 4 recipes that appeared in the beginning of the 20th century and that are capable of helping you today. Everybody knows that the first recipe is to sell a scandal. The second recipe is create a series of something. A third recipe is you need to go into a gallery. And I see poor people today who were taught how to paint, being few of those, of course, but those who know how to paint, they are not able to sell anything. They have to work in a comic book store or in a newspaper. What I want to tell you is that in this sense, and you can call me a nagging elderly man, but the art has lost a capability of artistic association. The art has lost this ability to paint. If you take Francis Bacon, and you know that he was a great painter, and he knew Velázquez quite well, but he was also a great painter, an artist, a professional. When professionals leave this art, leave this domain, and are replaced by installations, by photographs that can be done by anyone on the street, I think that the art criticism is bearing now, and all those outstanding people like Tom Wolfe or Robert Hughes or any other names which I can call, those people who are not afraid to speak about art as art per se, unfortunately, the majority of critics today are engaged. It seems to me that it would be extremely important that if someone will get a desire to explain certain things to general public, today the demand, you see, today the demand is identified by critics and the market value.
Or object.
Qu'est-ce que je pourrais dire? En tout cas, moi, je crois qu'il faut pas être...
I don't know what to say. I think that the most important here is not to be pessimistic too much. When we see that something very mundane is coming back, when we see real things in the last auctions, while the world is cast into chaos, Arabic world, and some other things, today we see that people, instead of buying yet another car for themselves, like the 25th already, or buying jewelry for their lovers, they're buying paintings at modern art galleries. And this is a sign, I believe, that people do place trust in the art. It's not just a wish or a mark that people want to invest into the art. Many people really do invest into the art, but not everyone is so silly to really think that the art of the last 50 years is a good investment for your money.
Donc, il y a des gens...
And it means that there are people today who have this desire to buy modern art, contemporary art, and who play a role of explaining this art to the society, to the people. It became really complex now. Everything is so complicated. Today, this attitude towards communication, towards love has changed, towards time. Everything has changed. And probably the modern and contemporary artists, with their illiterate, with their fuzzy language, give us just some preliminary steps on this way to understanding the art. We shouldn't forget that our society is absurd, and today we care about our planet, and as soon as people start consume less, we always say that it's dangerous. The society is living through a crisis. Absurd reigns all over the world. And that's what modern artists try to convey by means of the modern tools and instruments that correspond to the interests of the modern society.
Я попрошу ответить. Я попрошу продолжить кого-нибудь из...
I would like to ask to continue to take the floor someone from the working group, Vladimir Hankin, from the Triumph Gallery. Hello. I just want to finish this once and for all. I don't want to speak a lot. The market, I am the market. Come down, please. I am a part of this food chain that is called a gallery owner. You can despise us, you can interpret us, you can treat us wrongly. But we are a piece, an element, a jigsaw piece of this big market puzzle. We have critics, yes, we have somebody to be feared of. But I was listening to this nagging, Andrei, as you called it, and I believe it's not quite fair. All the processes that are witnessed today also took place in the 17th century and the 18th century. It all started with a small strip of wood which 30,000 years ago a man painted in stripes. Starting from that point in time, this market appeared, and the market lives by its own rules. Nothing is wrong with them. They're objective, as Marxists say. You should not fight against them. You have to research them and to follow them. And I would like to bring back our discussion not to the meaning of an artist. Let's speak about criticism. Let's speak about our today's modern criticism, art criticism in the environment of the modern Russian market, which is absent. There is no Russian market. We have some tools, we have some instruments, we have some attributes of the market, but the market doesn't work. It cannot be forecasted. It's sporadic. It's shallow. It's It's an inconsistent. It's a half market. And we, the gallery owners, we are not art dealers. We are psychotherapists who have to deal with very strange complexes of very strange people who have very strange money. Or we can be called enlighters, who can show and who can act, who can enact, or try to explain what is painted in here or what is shown in this installation. But it's the critics who have to enlighten the people because it's their role and nobody relieved them out of it. When I listen about critics being engaged, it's hilarious. No one has been engaged by anyone. Well, actually, you may engage someone, but there is no one who can engage. It's the critic himself who has engaged himself. Or he was engaged by his old friends or his old connections, which we have to cast away because it's not the market mechanism we can even discuss. In general, I agree that an absence or an availability of a critical text about an exhibition is more important than its quality. Whether the artist is being criticized or is being praised or he's being really reduced to nothing, it doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter. Yes, I understand that a different scenario is possible. Like the New York Times is writing about a gallery, and that the gallery is showing a good artist. Yes, the next day there will be three or four phone calls, 3 or 4 private acquirers will go to this gallery, and everything would be successful. Everything would be great and good, unless the next critic text will come out. Or it could be Guggenheim or Mom. It's a different story, though. It's about the market. But this phase or this environment is serviced by the community of critics. In Russia, this community is absent. And amongst highly respected critics that I know, we don't have a market critic as such. No one writes about the market. Yes, once a year we have this Art Moscow publication, which sometimes gives figures, sometimes gives details. Yes, but a person... But can I work in Russia? I am looking for some work in Russia. Where, then? Where it is in here? Can we read that? Yes, I saw this pink book. Yes, it's a good book. But I'm speaking now about the periodical press, about those who are working not with masses, but with the professional reader, which is much more important here. And then, in general, the relationship between a critic and the market is possible and is necessary only where this market is available and when it functions as it should, in the way it was perceived, where there's supply, where there's demand, where there's courageous people who rush into this business, notwithstanding the risks, whatever the risks, and trying to drag somebody else into that. Well, those tricksters who lead kids to the dark and dangerous forest have to be critics, not gallery owners. The gallery owners have to wait behind the fir tree with their teeth ready to tear them apart, but it doesn't happen like that. And again, and I'm ready to argue that the market is non-existent in this country. And whatever applicable to those fading countries of the West or to the Eastern countries, it's not applicable in here. And this market of art in terms of its capacity, is bigger than, of course, the second car dealership network or drugs market, but not in Russia. Not in Russia. Though, of course, we have a very mighty antiques market. There is this desire to buy old Russian classical art. Well, this old classical Russian art is not really true, it's phony. But I'm working in the modern, in a contemporary art world, and I don't see any development in there. What we see is an attempt to work within an already developed and already existing mechanism. Interaction with art criticism. No, sorry, I'll start again. We're all being brought here now in one big group by forthcoming hurricanes and storms, and we need to preserve something that we had in the past, and we have to preserve it because otherwise we will break the continuity. And without knowledge, without the knowledge of the market, without the attempts to forecast and to plan the market, we would not be able to preserve this continuity. And we have to do it all together, not separately, but all together. And it's easy to be sad with everything. It's easy to be unhappy with everything. I am happy with everything. I like everything what's happening in here. However, I had to learn how to be happy with only a little. Of course, we had some good years and we had some bad years, but the wins that we are perceiving today in the world are much more dangerous and much more threatening than previously. The boat is shaking right now, is rolling, and we have to keep our hands together so tight to be able to hold on this boat. When I think about the market, I think about the future, because it won't happen today. And of course not tomorrow and not the day after tomorrow, because nothing usually happens on Sunday. When we have only 3 foundations and 10 collectioneers, it's not the market. There have to be many institutions. Those institutions have to pass artists from one hand to the others. The collectioners have to queue up in front of an artist, and it won't be like that unless we do it ourselves. And then, out of those many artists, we will be selecting some good, some cream of the crop, some golden beans, so to say. And then those collectioners, those big boys and big girls, they will say, yes, this is the real art. We want this art to our palaces, to our castles. And that's where we will come in the stage, because we are the market and we service this particular market. Unfortunately, the speaker speaks not in the mic.
По дороге?
You will have a wonderful opportunity to continue this discussion on your way back. Yes, we wish everyone this wonderful conference, and I thank you for your comments. Of course, we have to hold on to each other, but sometimes you can swim alone. Goodbye. Okay, the members, we have only 5 members of our working group remaining. Irina, you may take the floor if you want. In continuation what Dmitry told, and it's a pity that Dmitry left us. On behalf of all critics, because I'm a person who writes about the art and the market, I need to remark that I do not agree. And I see that people are raising their hands, they do not agree as well. I cannot but say that we have those critics who write about the market, and we understand that when a critic walks into this domain, he happens to be in a situation when he has to describe a piece of art, and he also has to say whether this painting is taking its right place and what kind of place this painting is taking in the life, in the creative work of this artist. And of course there's market. The market with his own laws, with his own rules. There's a price volatility and all the other processes that do happen on the money field. And one of the objectives of the critic is to find a language which which will allow him to make a bridge between the material part and the artistic part. And again, making a reference to Dmitri's word, critics writes about the market only where the market is existent and where the market is sufficient enough to provide some material, because galleries do not publish any sales reports. And it's really problematic to write whether the prices for particular artists are going up or going down. The prices are usually quoted by auctions. The auction business today is developing, and I think Victor will continue this topic in not a very active way. It's not in its full swing, though of course we witness an increase in the number of auctions. Still, this auction market is quite closed, and the critic has only the artistic part to describe, not the market or the price part to describe. Trying to fish out some figures from this part and describe the market conditions. But whether the critic writes about the figures or the arts, he still influences the market. And my colleagues may agree with me or not, what critic does influences the market even more than the artist himself, because I mean that then the necessity to put an artist somewhere in this historical line. Even without citing some foreign or Western names of critics, I can say that if you hear words of a critic that this is a wonderful artist, people don't usually buy and go and buy this artist. But what they do is just pay some attention to such artists. But still, I think that critics influence the market, even our own market, even however insignificant it may be. Who's next? Leonid Shishkin, the director of Leonid Shishkin's Gallery, one of the first private galleries of Moscow. I attribute myself to optimists. How do we call our forum here? The art and reality, right? But what we discussed here before that, I would call the high end of contemporary art. Well, somebody will write about Damien Hirst tomorrow. Somebody else will trade his paintings, will sell his paintings. But it seems to me that, and why I am an optimist, because I'm following this market and I'm participating in the life of this market for a long time. My gallery exists already for 23 years officially. And the first exhibition I made in Moscow 33 years ago. At that time, I was a journalist, and the country was closed, and I tried to help my friends, artists, non-conformists, of course, to express themselves. Can you imagine that? In 1977, this exhibition was organized in an apartment, in a big apartment in Kundrinsky Street, where only high-profile diplomats were able to enter. And during this particular period, I happened to acquire this very optimistic attitude towards life. Our people are interested in arts. And during this, well, of course, this statistic I can get from the auctions. Today we speak about only contemporary arts, this actual arts. Then, of course, this contemporary art does not show the full picture. Though I think that in Moscow we have a number of good quality galleries that deal with contemporary art, there are no auctions that can trade such contemporary art yet in here. But if we speak about critics, mass media helps us a lot during all those times. I think that thanks to this close contact with mass media, with critics, we managed to significantly increase the number of people who are interested in art. And one more point I'd like to make here. When we started, We started with nonconformist pieces of art, but we soon came to realize in the beginning of the 90s that social realistic works, which was criticized so much in previous times, became quite popular in the markets suddenly. There were a lot of buyers, a lot of galleries that exhibited such works. Then some time passed, and the social realism became completely uninteresting. You really have to consider those generation gaps, those generation occurrences, the occurrences that are characteristic of a particular generation. You know, a person can develop this energy of delusion. A person who buys art is very rarely just a student, or very rarely a person who has got small kids. It's usually a man, an accomplished man, who thinks of himself something. He buys art, not just an art, but something. He buys something that he believes reflects himself. He buys something that speaks for himself. Well, imagine a person has already bought the full collection. He have passed this stage of his life. Then he gradually removes from the, he gradually goes down from this stage, and the next person comes up with a completely different set of values, with a completely different set of interests. And it's a normal and quite a natural process. I was listening to that to what people were saying here, and they believe that everything is going to its end. No, it's not like that. I do believe that you can't hear me, right? Okay, I will speak. I'll speak to the mic. Well, I don't think that it's so worrisome.
On the contrary, I have a feeling that, you see, we are, if we are talking about the Russian market, we're still away from the market. We are at a different stage, but this is a very optimistic stage. In general, we have very cultured buyers. You see, because there's a lot of clients from that high end moved to the UK. I had to come closer to them. I had to open a showroom there, and naturally, it is attended by the British to see Russian art. And in general, a Russian buyer is very cultured. It's easy to work with him. And in that sense, it seems to me that we have some basis rather for optimism than for pessimism. Nothing is coming to an end, and certainly modern art is complex, and it's not easy to understand it. And that's the task of this generation and the young critics to match. Thank you, Leonid. Now, we would like to hear a collectioner's opinion. René Guerra. First, I wanted to thank the organizers of this forum, Art and Reality. First and foremost, Piotr Konchalovsky's fund for very good organization. And right away, I would like to say something that was not voiced yet. It was mentioned, our subject is art and money. Market. I, like my neighbor, is an optimist. And I say, I'll tell you why. Because for the first time, we mentioned Sotheby's and Christie's and other auctions today. And recently, we talked about the gallery owners. I should say that these auctions, the Sotheby's, the Christie's, and others, but let's not advertise them. And other, just like the galleries, they facilitated 20 years ago, and we're talking about the period of 20 years, we think in scores of years, they facilitated the return of the Russian art. First it was Shishkin, Repin, and so on at the end of the 20th century, and then the world of art. And I wanted to say this in Russia and in St. Petersburg. Russian collectioners and Russian public reopened the Buzinsky, Benoit, Somov, Goncharova, and others. And a curious process. Actually, the museum started to follow the galleries. A good example is an exhibition in St. Petersburg, which is dedicated to Boris Grigoriev. And then there was an exhibition in Moscow, and now in Paris. So after the Mir Iskustva, after the world of art, we renewed interest to artists who lived and created far away from their fatherland, but continued to serve Russian culture in Paris. I will not enumerate it. De Stael, one of the first great masters of the 20th century, and Sergei Polakov, and Lanskoy, and Shashun, and others. And because of that, I'm optimistic. And like my neighbor said, really, Russian collectioner, and not only collectioner, but just Russians enjoy going to those exhibitions. They do see those pictures, and that inspires joy, and we can hope for the better. And this triumphal return of a whole generation of Russian culture during the last 20 or 10 years here to Russia is a unique phenomenon. And I'm not exaggerating at all the importance of this phenomenon. This is a revanche. And this is only just doing justice to those great masters. And the part of the gallery is certainly, they will say the oligarchs in Rublov highway will buy it. Yes, they are rich. What's next? What follows? Nevertheless, the process is started, and in this case, it's a positive process. And I'm sincerely glad about that as an amateur and as a person who loves Russian art. Thank you, Mr. Guerrero. Before we pass the floor to Anna Aratunova, I would like to address the main curator of the museums of France, Denis Coutagna, one of the leading experts on post-impressionism. We mentioned the early 20th century many times during this session. Please tell me, Monsieur Coutagna, when was the art market formed, and how did Cézanne ascend to the throne, and were there any critics at that time? I wanted to take the floor and ask Mr. Konchalovsky when he spoke about Vollard, because we spoke about the relationship between Cézanne and Vollard. Of course, the art market existed even before. Certainly, they were not the gallery owners that we describe, but they could be bishops, counts, popes. But even in the pre-revolutionary of France, there was an art market. What happens in the 19th century? This art market is occupied by academic salons through which you had to pass to get access to the market and get access to commissions. During the royal or during the republican regimes or during the empire, this system became degrading and falling apart. But that doesn't mean that the artists did not go out to the market. Monet finds a buyer, Durand-Ruel. Cézanne did not work to sell because he was a son of a rich person. There was no need to sell to earn a living, but actually Cézanne had never problems with money, even if the image of a painter as a bohemian was in his subconscious. There was Marchand, who was born in the island of Rayon, who certainly wanted to become famous, who wanted to make a lot of money, who loved Impressionists. But when he was looking for success, he was looking for an artist that he would like, and he loved the artists whom he started to defend. He loved Picasso, Van Gogh. He didn't like Van Gogh very much, so Van Gogh was not lucky. As for Cézanne, he was once told there is an unknown artist who didn't exhibit for 20 years, and even Maurice Denis wondered if he was still alive. Maybe that was a pseudonym, and Vallard said, "Let me exhibit him." And that worked. In 1895, Vallard involved Cézanne into the market, and very fast, Cézanne, people started buying Cézanne in New York. There appears Geoffroy. There are people who come to Maurice Denis. But all that happens by the end of Cézanne's life. Of course, Cézanne worked without looking back at the art market. Cézanne is an exception. At a certain point, when his activity is not for the market, but there is a system that could provide the financial well-being of an artist. There are certain bankers, there are certain rich people, entrepreneurs. During the Industrial Revolution, when the United States are developing, and even in Germany, where France is not very much loved, nevertheless, they buy French art, they get excited about French art, and although those artists do not get a commercial recognition at once, Monet and Vallard, up to 1940, I think he died in 1939, Vallard is one of the main marchands, main dealers of the 20th century. Of course, he knows his business, he knows how to attract the attention, he knows how to go to X and to pick up everything in the studio that remained after Cézanne's death. And about 800 pictures by Cézanne passed through Vallard's hands, but you mustn't underestimate his influence. He's a big person who made Cézanne's reputation, who sold Cézanne to Shukin and Morozov. Because of Vallard, Cézanne is in the Petit Palais collection in Paris. So there must be a society that needs the artists. The market has changed since the 19th century. One can ask oneself what art was embodied in Impressionism, what kind of ideas are embodied in modern art, but the art market is necessary. We need the dealers, and although Durand-Ruel works along different lines nowadays because there is in internet, there are international relations, but there are other consumers of art, and I'm glad they exist and they appear. I was just reproached for giving the floor to everyone except art critics. I would like to pass the microphone to the person who said that, art critic Sergei Khachaturov. It seems to me that Andron was absolutely right, who said that the art commercialized. Do you know when it happened? In the 17th century. The small Dutch masters, the pride of the Hermitage, is a purely commercial art, and all of them painted to sell. Absolutely all of them. That was a commercial activity, in fact. More than that, when Mr. Hankin spoke, he said a lot of interesting things, but the matter is that a critic must not serve the market. A critic must be the tuning fork of taste. And that's the main objective for a critic. The critic must be responsible for public taste. Do not make an idol that his made commandment. Don't make an idol to thyself. There must be no market in criticism. There must be an objective evaluation of what is happening in art. And more than that, it seems to me that nothing bad is happening in art nowadays. Well, here's Valentin Diakov, a colleague of mine, and we agree with him that very interesting processes are taking place. They're interesting. And more than that, you know, Moscow conceptualism. This movement, which prevailed for a long time, finally is being replaced by a new direction in art. Albert will get a prize, I hope. He will. And with that, conceptualism will come to an end. Because the Moscow conceptualism was a great movement starting with 1970s, but now it's being replaced by something else. We are the barometers. We are the gauges. We are the critic's task is to create a text that would be adequate to the text that he sees, to the plastic text that he sees. And probably Benoit and Efros are the only ones who reached that level. We cannot. But we are trying to. But we will never subordinate it to the market or to any policies in art, because we think that we must create adequate description of what is happening in art, of that process that is going on. What do you think? Thank you, Sergey. Thank you very much for this comment. The tuning fork of taste, that's the right thing to say. And some practical information for the people who came to listen to what criticism and art market is. I know that at least one of my newspaper publications, a positive review of an exhibition resulted in a sale. I know for sure that my colleagues did the same. Some of their materials about artists and collections result in some movement in the market. The problem is different. Yes, and I would like to make Dmitry Hankin happy, although this is impossible because we don't write about his gallery because we are snobs and we believe what he displays is disgusting. The Triumph Gallery, like all other galleries, feels very well, and the sales after an article is a pleasant addition to their everyday activity. Why? Because Russian collectioners, and I think it's typical for collectioners everywhere, find it very important to establish personal communication with the gallery owner. And many galleries try to entertain and lionize the collectioners. And there are gallery owners, and one of them is in the Presidium, that do not only explain and sell art, but also they provide people with a sense of their importance, entertain people, bring them into this joyful world, and try to make that world diverse and colorful. And the collectioners who are linked to the galleries, who found a common language, do not really care about criticism, because many businessmen have a negative attitude to the printed word. That's a tradition. And the last practical thing that I want to say, I was very much surprised by Irina's words. It's very easy to find about the sales. There are things that Russian galleries do not want to mention the prices because they are scared of taxes. Russian publications do not publish the prices because the tax office is a horrid organization that can really bother you no end. Thank you. Nina, and after you, Alexander Makharovsky. How about Anna? Well, I don't need speaking. I will. There are objective critics here who must be the tuning fork of taste, and it's unjust not to give them the floor. But I want to address you. What should you do if you're a critic, and a critic cannot be 100% objective? You talked about Cézanne. Let us recall the 19th century. Baudelaire and Zola supported Edouard Manet. Zola, who was a friend of Cézanne's, did not understand his painting at all, and he sold Cézanne's pictures, the pictures that he brought from his garret. What did Stasov do, who supported the Peredvizhniks, but he hated Benoit and the new aesthetic work, and then called him the Bard of Dirt? What do you do with Alexander Benoit, who actually was a critic of his direction, who was writing a history of art? He was a brilliant critic, but he had the idiosyncrasy about avant-garde, something that the Russia is now proud of. He hated avant-garde. Let us leave the critics with that 10% of our attitude, the attitude of doubt in one's own infallibility. And please tell me, we know from history of art what about these things. So I adore your texts. I find them most interesting, but let's not talk about 100% objectiveness. Well, the day before yesterday, I listened to Lubantsev, the pianist, and he said that Spivakov plays very well, and here the conductor is Titov. So what do we do? Spivakov is great, and Titov is not bad. Even good. But what do we do? The more we have discussions, the more professional prizes exist, then we'll at least choose a criterion. If you have one critic like Stasov, but Stasov was a great critic, but he did not understand art at all. He did not understand art at all. He understood nothing about art. You say commonplace things. Yeah. He did not understand. Benoit did understand art. Thank you. And because of that, all that world of art started. But Stasov did not understand a thing in art. He was a kind of an absolute specialist in literature. He was logocentric. He only wanted to have some critical mass. Yes. Well, wait a bit, wait a bit, wait a bit. Alexander, wait a bit. You speak a lot. So, please wait for your turn. Wait a bit, okay? Because we are guests here. And you will later come out and say everything you want. It seems to me that there must be a lot of critics, and they must be diverse. There must be critics of different generations. I brought up a whole range of critics. Diakonov, by the way, my first apprentice. Agunovich is another apprentice of mine. Where is Agunovich, by the way? Why don't we have any critics in the presidium? Two girls, okay. Yes. Shall we pass the floor to Anya Arutunova? May I finish? Or I can't say anything. I don't have the right. May I still say something? I can say one thing. That there must be a lot of critics. Critics must be different. Critics must be with different tastes in different directions. You want to be a neo-conceptualist, you're welcome. We have a whole direction of that. There's an exhibition in your cellar, Arseny Zhilaev, Stas Shuripa, Anna Titova, that is neo-conceptualism. There's neo-formalism. There's a lot of movements that can be critically perceived and brought back to art. And I stand for that. I stand for good and honest professional criticism. Thank you.
Anna, you have the floor now. We cannot but agree that there should be many critics, and they have to be of various talents. In particular, we need to have critics who write about the art market and who turn market into the subject of their criticism. Or, shall I say, the subject of their research. Because, as was said, each epoch had its own system of market and its own system of arts. The market worked differently in different conditions. The market consists of specific components that are interacted, that are linked with each other, and the critic who writes about art may make an attempt to explain those mechanisms and how it all works, so that the mass reader, whom Dmitry Hankin has mentioned, could react not only to record-breaking sums that are paid to specific paintings of specific artists, but identified certain occurrences, certain things that are characteristic of this particular time period. And the critic can also write about the tastes. I mean, that the critic can really do what they're meant to do. Why a particular art is so popular with the spectator or with the buyer. What kind of galleries are promoting what kind of artists, and why exactly those artists. So this is something interesting for a critic. It's a possibility to conduct an anthropological research of the modernity. And I think that what makes a critic who writes about art market stand out, as opposed to a critic who writes about art in general and who serves, as Sergei called him, a showcase of art. You understand everything about art. Yes, you explain me nice things, but why people don't buy the art today? Well, this is the reason for the anthropological research. Well, then you need to call yourself an anthropologist and start researching skulls, eyes, and ears. What kind of market can you research then? There is a profession which is called an analytic of a artistic market. It's not criticism, it's a specific profession which have to be separated. Yesterday, Dmitry Gutov has made a joke that criticism doesn't influence anything because it's a gallery owner who makes this influence. And we don't need critics as such because it doesn't influence our pricing models. I really hope that he was joking in order to show off. And as well, also I believe that Sergei showed that criticism is a tuning fork of art. There's no critic. There's only 2 or 3 magazines, and our art criticism have to play by the rule set of those 3 or 2 magazines. These are also rules of the game. The rules of the game within which we have to exist. I believe that the market can use critic in some way, but he is not a player. Neither were the players in this market those great critics of the 20th century. They can be players of the social life. They can be figures of history, because some artists are perceived by us only through or by a medium of critics. And I still believe, and this is really sad, that in our situation, a critic is restrained to really small texts, like journals, like several lines in a newspaper. A critic is a person making literature, and a critic is a tuning fork of himself. If he has the necessary skills, if he has the talent, if he has the perfect Russian language or non-Russian language, in some sort he is developing himself, and that's the role he's playing on this market, only just because galleries need certain famous critics. They need them. However, today even the gallery owners themselves started to write, or the gallery workers started to write about the art. What we speak here is about literature, and literature not in a sense of some beauties, but descriptions, but in a sense that helps critics to get into this, or helps artists to get in this modern life. Again, turning to this tuning fork, the critic has to be in line with somebody's taste. The taste of whom? Because some people like social life, other artists like forms, others people like sentencing something. For example, critics like sentencing, some of them. In the 19th century, they wrote that if there's no sentence, there's no criticism. I think that this tuning fork is tuned towards itself. And when you're tuned to a very small newspaper and a very small magazine, it doesn't help you. Unfortunately, these are all drawbacks of our profession. Now, coming back to Stasov, I have started reading Stasov, by the way. I can fully agree here with you that he didn't know anything about the arts. And with that, he still wrote wonderful literature that you can read with interest. Then it means that he was writing criticism. When you criticize party policy, a policy of a party, well, it's not a literature. And I'd like to draw attention to what I'm saying. I'm now publishing a book, and I'm advertising. I'm using this time wisely, because otherwise I'm sitting here doing nothing. My book is called The Art for Dogs. The Art for Dogs. This is the real market, I believe. I have already published my book. You can have a look. See? Romantism outside romantism. You have already given me that as a present, right? No, it's an old book of yours, not a new one. Now, my book about dogs is something top-notch, is something hot. Well, if you're not able to speak up, then you are functioning within a certain system. You are a slave of the system, either a social one or a generation one or you are a slave of a trend. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you very much, Alexander. During your presentation, Valentin Dyakinov asked for a word and then brought back the mic to me. Maybe he had something to say. Now he's lost his thread of thought. But are there any people who want to say something? Alexander Popov raised the hand here. The most important things I wanted to say were already pronounced from the stage in here, and we're mixed up. It's the second day that we mess up the whole terminology, the war camps, the main trends, and so on and so forth. But what's important, criticism can be different. It's not just a division between subjective or discussive or stylistic criticism. It's the other sort of difference. When we speak about the market, when we speak about money, when we speak about art criticism, some very important things were already voiced here. These are two different professions. Market observers, be that an antiques market, be that the market of contemporary and actual arts, which is non-existent in Russia, as we were told. This is one thing. The artistic critic and the artistic criticism, especially an artistic criticism in periodical publications. And again, coming back to antiques, the antiques are criticized or described in a specific publishing venues. These are two different parallel, non-crossing lines. And in order to adequately write about an antiques market or about the market of the contemporary art, you need to have a background of an art historian. You really need to know what's the difference between Rembrandt and Picasso. But on the other hand, you still need to know the prices for this Hearst, whom we mentioned the second day in a row. You really need to know how prices are going down and going up. This is first. We've already mixed everything up. We turned it into a porridge of different things, and now we're trying to dig out or fish out for raisins of sense. And third thing, the role of a critic is not of a researcher. Though my colleague here, Alexander, have advertised his book, this book is a book of an art critic. When you speak about journalism and its relation to art criticism, we mean that art journalism is an applied science, which is very short-lived. And it's only that the best of us will live forever and will stay for eternity. It's only those of us who are lucky whose articles will live long and will stay. I don't know who will do this research and dig out all our articles, but it's possible. Still, it's possible. Even in the past, those famous journalists of the past, they also wrote for one day only. A critic, to my mind, is a person who makes things popular. That's what Andrei told us. But Andrei, I think, is mixing some words, popularization and propaganda. Because when he told us that you need to explain to people that this is not the art, that you shouldn't invest into that. Well, first, those people who invest their money, and I repeat that, very rarely they don't, or very rarely they do, but usually they don't read periodical critical works, and they don't usually reassess or revise their attitude towards the works of art. Who reads critical reviews? The masses, general public, but this general public does not buy pieces of art, the works of art, due to some understandable material reasons, because they don't have enough money for that. And for this mass public, we have to explain some things, but we do not need to make verdicts, any particular verdicts. We shouldn't be the tuning fork of the taste, because every one of us has a tuning fork inside himself. We have to popularize, but we do not have to make it a propaganda. Mr. Adronov told us some things. He knows what is an art and what's not. He knows why Hearst is an art and why somebody else is not an art. That's his own personal viewpoint. I can have an absolutely different viewpoint. And the last thing which I wanted to tell you about, which I believe would be mostly interesting for you, and it's a very little detail. I'm representing a classical case of schizophrenia here. This is wrong, and I'm telling you that it's wrong. I'm not a critic. I'm a collectioner as well. I'm not only a critic, I'm a collectioner as well. I have more than 250 works of art, and I have to separate pieces of my mind when I do different things. For example, when I try to collect the works of art and when I try to write a critical review. And I liked a phrase made by Marek Bartelek when he told that when he was young, he felt with his heart something about a painting. But today he can explain everything, but he's only capable of thinking with his head. That his senses have failed to some extent. And I think that I am able and capable of explaining myself and explaining a reader, however humble my skills may be, something about the things that I see every day in the galleries, in the museums. What I take as an investment and I buy for myself, that I collect, is something completely different. And I wouldn't want to share some of the ideas that have driven me to buy a work of art to my reader. Alexander is right saying that critic is subjective, but I think it wouldn't become worse if critic would still retain some coolness of mind, would still stay cool. I've noticed that the further part of this audience is passive. We want you to be active. Alessia Turkina, please. She is a leading
researcher at the Russian Museum. This is an answer to Moscow critics. There are some critics in the room. If you turn back, you will see some of us in the back rows. And why are you in the back benchers? Well, I can see the whole of the room, and you could take a strategic position. As for criticism, this is a difficult issue. There is professional criticism. It exists in Russia. It has existed in the 20th century, and it still exists. Something is wrong with the mic. And it exists now. But, unfortunately, because of the circumstances, we must combine different functions. We have to write to popular magazines and to intellectual magazines. As for the reading audiences that read us, once I was really shocked between I was writing for money and for the pleasure, and I wrote to an airline magazine, and I entered the plane and I saw all of them were reading my article. And because these people were going to a resort, and I was very proud of that. And although the article was written in a different manner than those articles that I write to artistic magazines or to flash art or to the third text and so on. So sometimes you have to divide these things, and as Alexander said, a professional critic knows what an edition he's writing for and respects the rules of the game. Another issue, the issue of upbringing, of educating critics, and I would like to come back to the education issue. I know that there are students from Smolny Institute here. They came to me during the break and they said, it's written in our diplomas, art critic. They work in the Russian Museum. They write to magazines. There are critics in Russia. Everything is not that bad. There's not only art. There's not only galleries and museums that deal with contemporary art, but there's quite a lot of critics who know very well what they are doing. The issue is that you have to develop certain professional criteria and professional language, and not to talk about the language in general. And we could really use very good examples to be trained. For instance, Judith's presentation was an example of how you can clearly set the problem and represent it to the audience. By the way, this was an excellent masterclass for young critics, for those who are going to write on critical issues. Thank you. Thank you, Olesa. We haven't heard to the painters, to the artists. The dialogue is between gallery owners, critics, and journalists. Gaetano Grillo. Signor Grillo, do you have something to say? I would like to say that this morning I was planning to go to the Hermitage. I did not want to leave this city without visiting a museum like that. I don't know whether it's fashionable, but this morning I tried. I felt a greatest emotion, and at some point of time I felt tears running down my cheeks. I saw wonderful things. Naturally, all that art was from the previous ages, and I became even more convinced that the art is timeless, and that pieces of art, when their time has passed, continue to retain their importance. And therefore, probably we should revise the notion of modernity, because probably we are depriving ourselves of something. We always talk about the contemporary art, and we are too much preoccupied with today. We lose the feeling of memory, the feeling of history and values. And I think that Konchalovsky said a very interesting thing today, very beautiful things, he said. And the conversation about the market is developing, but if the market expands more and more, and not only in the world of art, the market has captured the whole world, it is because we cannot fill the emptiness with new senses, with new values. I was talking about beauty yesterday, and I must apologize because when I speak, it seems that you feel like you are nostalgic. But beauty does not belong to the past. The beauty is eternal, irrespective of our ability to understand it. And I think that our time demands to provide a new justification, the sense, the value, and the quality. And as an artist, I feel that when we manage to reinstitute those values and set some boundaries for the market, so that the market has boundaries. I'm not against the market. I'm against us, because we cannot express anything today, and we allow the market to go beyond its natural limits. Thank you. Well, during 1 minute, I will ask each of you to formulate an answer to the question, what is the problem of a collision between the market and the art? And art, and the participation of art, market and art criticism, because I think we need to postpone this discussion till next time. Not till tomorrow, probably till the next year. So I would like you to formulate the main problem within 1 minute each. Who will be brave enough to start? Let me start. I think that really we should distinguish the art critic and art dealer. I will try to speak within 1 minute. Most of those who comment the market do not talk about the chronology about the artist's creative life, but the art critic must distance himself. He must define his relationship with artistic work. From what I heard certain monologues, but I did not hear a true discussion. It's difficult to make progress in this format. Well, there are first different types of criticism, and more than that, we shouldn't be afraid, or as art critics shouldn't be afraid of entering the market topics in art, because the more information about how this works, the easier it is and the clearer is the situation. I don't think there is a big contradiction between art world and the world of market in general. They're so closely connected and have always been connected that you cannot clearly distinguish between them. It's clear that some critics go deeper into the issues of art and concepts, and some are more interested in the market processes. Those are various and interesting. The only thing is that it seems to me that a critic that writes about the market must have a good notion about the art history, because quite often the prices on a certain masterpiece at the auctions are closely related to the uniqueness of that work, of that specific piece of art, and its place in the history of art. So I don't think they are mutually contradictory. Thank you, Irina. Everything has been said, but I believe that art critics are complementary. If they are really enlightened and independent, they are needed. Everything depends on the part that is given to each. So they are mutually complementary. I can join that opinion. More than that, we have great relationships, and no contradictions, no problems that I can see, because it's like your left hand and your right hand. So you agree with Dmitry Havkin, who said that the issue of relationships between artists, art critics, and markets should be solved in the territory of the future. So we'll wait for the future. You talked to Maxim Kantor already. Unfortunately, I wanted to ask him another question, but I can't see him. But Yana Rebrova, 3I, Ideas, Innovation, Initiative. I care for the world of art, and I would like to revive that world, to provide initiative, to make an impetus for this impetus, so that this world might live. We have experts. Could the professional art critics raise their hands? I have a companion moderator, co-moderator. I can only see one hand. Art critics, professional art critics. In the gallery? Okay. I heard that there are young art critics who are in the third year at the university, some graduates, some recent graduates. Can you raise your hands? Are you recruiting an army? 3. The moderator of this session, Judith, said that there is a great task, a rethink of the art criticism. I apologize, but you are paid by Konchalovsky's fund? Is that your function here. It's necessary to change the paradigm. Do we have a coup d'etat? Yeah. You take very good notes. Andrei Konchalovsky explained what the change of paradigm means. First, it's needed that artists and experts think that art is first and money is next. And to think about art without anything in the back of their minds. Further, right now we're looking for the chief editor who will be in charge of the collected articles of this forum. And I believe that the room will support me if we consider this candidate. I have a question to the participants of this session, which is already coming to an end and people are leaving. Cantor said that it's necessary for people to read so that the participants of the art world buy a book and read it. I have a question. Art experts and the young art experts, teachers, what book must be read to think further about art without anything in the back of your mind? And how do you change the paradigm and re-establish the values, as Mr. Gaetano said? Thank you. I hope I will hear the answer. And if I don't hear the answer, it would be nice if come tomorrow. Come tomorrow. And could you provide a list of problems that was discussed in the web? We will make a Xerox of your, we'll make a scan of your notes. Thank you very much.